All right, welcome everyone back to day 2 of our Pain Free for Life Jumpstart. We had an amazing day yesterday. We got a lot of stuff going on in the Facebook group. I spent about 2 hours today going through everyone's homework and responding. If you've posted your homework after I went through, don't worry, I go back and I look at the end of the day as well. So I will be catching up on that too. There's also some great information there and some great realizations. I really think, people are very aware, which is what I saw in the last Jumpstart as well. People are very aware of the problems, the underlying problems that are actually causing them issues. And this is key to being able to understand and establish a healing presence in the body. So we're going to keep going through that work today. But I was pleasantly surprised with how many people were really open with everything that they've tried, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and just kind of getting that out there. So thank you everyone for sharing, and I really encourage you to continue to do that as well. Now, I know we've got hundreds of new people today from yesterday because everyone's letting their friends know about this. So we've got new people coming in. So for those who don't know me really quickly, I'm Dr. Rob Vanbergen. I'm a doctor of natural medicine, a doctor of humanitarian services, and I hold a PhD in natural medicine as well. I'm one of the founders of Pain Free for Life, and I am the host for the 5-day Jumpstart. So welcome to all of our new attendees. Welcome back to the attendees from yesterday as well. Now, I also know there's a little bit of confusion over everything going on, especially for people that are new today. So let me show you real quick how to find the guides section in the Facebook support group so that you can make the most of this event, okay? You can even get your workbook from there, and you can learn how to connect with your concierge from that as well. So let me just share my screen on that. So you're going to see my Facebook feed here on the Pain Free for Life support group for the Jumpstart. So this is the Jumpstart group. So you'll see this banner on the top. You know you're in the right place. And if you scroll down here, you can actually click on guides here. And if you click guides here, it's going to open up to this section where we go through there's some videos of me going through how to get started, how to find the sessions, the replays, your concierge, which we'll go through in a little bit here as well, and how to invite your friends to join the Jumpstart if you'd like to do that as well, okay? You'll also see in here how to access the homework threads. So you can click these to actually get to the homework. Everyone posted on one thread. A few people posted on their own, which is fine. But if you put them all in one thread, it's easier for myself and for my colleague Annie, who's helping me as well to respond. You'll also see these executive summaries. And if you click these, this should take you to this kind of image. Oh, it just dropped it out, but that's okay. It's floating around there somewhere. It just got small. But once you see this executive summary, you'll actually be able to read kind of notes of what happened yesterday. And it's going to keep posting those as well. So hold on one second here. Let me stop sharing this and just make sure that we are on here. I just noticed that my colleague Sophie was unmuted, so I've just muted her now because I think there was some background noise going on there. Okay. All right, so we're on. You've got to see where the guides are. It's a really good resource to have that as well, so not to worry there. Okay. All right, so that out of the way, let's continue with our announcements. And these are important because there's a lot going on, right? And we don't want people to miss things. So to everyone that's new or that came on late yesterday, please feel free to introduce yourself. Use #live, #replay, depending on if you're watching this live or later on. It's really nice to see you here. And we want to make sure you don't miss anything. So we're going to be having a lot of over communication. So please excuse us. It's not our normal way of doing things, but people are constantly asking where to find things. So we're sending out daily reminders, emails, texts, and an end of the day wrap up email as well. It's not like we're trying to spam you or anything. We just want to make sure that you have the resources and access that you need. I want to give a special shout out again to our team member, Leo, and Leo's helpers as well. Leo is really working hard to make sure you get what you need here. Leo is the workshop concierge and has personally reached out to each of you. Leo is going to help you out in the Facebook group as well as in direct messages on Facebook and by text as well. If possible, okay, it's really important that you connect with your concierge to get on the text loop with them. This is going to give you access to bonuses, to private event invites that are only available via text. If you haven't had contact with your concierge yet, just mention in the chat that you need a concierge in Facebook or on the Zoom chat, or you can even email concierge@painfreeforlife.com to make sure you get in touch with Leo. I will share the number as well during the presentation, and it's probably being dropped in chat as we speak. So 3 very important pieces of information before we dive in for the day: replays, workbook, access to Facebook. You can access everything that I just mentioned at pffljumpstartreplays.com. Please don't share this link. It's just for people that have registered for the event. If you're on Facebook and you'd rather be on Zoom, you can go to pffljumpstartzoom.com to watch us on Zoom instead of on the Facebook group. Leo's number, 415-688-2045. Again, 415-688-2045. For the full event experience, I do recommend you do jump into the Facebook group. Again, you can go to pffljumpstartreplays.com. You'll be able to join the group through there and watch the replays each day as well. The big benefit to the Facebook group is being able to interact on homework. I get to see your homework questions and interact with you as well, and seeing more event info that, of course, Zoom is not set up to share, right? You saw the guide section. We don't have that option on Zoom. So do make sure if you go to the Facebook group that you answer the 3 questions to get access to the group. If not, my team will likely have been following up with you about it as well. I really want to encourage people, if you do use Facebook, to hop on there. I went through the homework this morning, and I replied to everyone that had posted at that time. And my goal is to make sure everyone gets a personal response from me. It's interesting to see, it helps us identify the issues, which we'll be working on today as well, that might be there. Everything is about this individualized treatment and really nailing down what's going on for the individual person and how we can help them. Okay, so without further ado, let us dive on in, okay? I'm just going to share my screen again, but this time to share the presentation, which hopefully you can see. Okay, here we go. So day 2, identifying the root source of your pain and the aggravators. Probably the most important part of this whole thing is to figure out what exactly is going on. Welcome to Jumpstart Day 2. So yesterday we talked about the failings of the conventional medical system, and many of you kind of resonated with that in your homework as well. In fact, I didn't see a single person that mentioned that this had been a good system for them. And what I asked you to do was to think about what has worked and what hasn't worked. So to all of you who've been told that you need to take drugs or have surgery or that you have 0 chance to ever get better, I want to ask you to challenge that today, because from what I have seen, from what we've seen here at Pain Free for Life, you can absolutely resolve your problems without drugs, without surgery, and there is absolutely something that we can do. Now, we've already started laying the groundwork here in the previous session, but today we're going to answer that big question. What is at the root of your pain or disease, and what aggravates it? A couple of people who did their homework yesterday actually identified it already in their homework, so they won't be too surprised. But this information is critical to understanding how to reverse the underlying issue, right? We can't do that if we don't know why we have the problem. So the big question, why am I not healing? Okay. Since we've been born, most of us, unless we were born with an autoimmune issue, most of us have been able to heal and recover from things, right? Somewhere along the line, something happened that prevented you from healing. So we have to ask ourselves that question. Why are we not healing? Because if our body is designed to heal itself, why would it suddenly stop? We're not built to fall apart. It doesn't make sense, right? We get cut, we bleed, and we heal. We get sick, we fight it off, and we heal. So something is standing in the way of recovery there. Something is amiss. Excuse me, guys, I'm choking. That's never happened before. So, sorry, bear with me 1 second. Okay, I think I'm fully recovered there. I'm not sure what happened. I think I inhaled a little bit of dust, so please accept my apologies for that. But inflammation here is the issue we have to be concerned about. You've probably heard of inflammation before. It's a natural part of the healing process, though, during the acute stages. And although it may be uncomfortable, it does serve a purpose. But when inflammation turns chronic, that's when we need to start to worry. So acute versus chronic inflammation is the big question here, because doctors will define that at least 3 months of pain must pass before you can be considered to have chronic pain. Perhaps in these cases, you even need to be referred to as a specialist, but by a specialist as well, in order to actually get that diagnosis. Now, I don't believe that that is true because it's easy to kind of identify when someone is experiencing chronic pain. To me, when properly supported, the body should be done with that inflammatory response within 2 to 3 weeks. Easy. When the natural inflammatory response occurs for an acute injury or condition, it may not feel good, but it does serve a purpose. So, what you'll see here is the standard process of inflammation is something harmful enters the body, and then we receive this inflammation, pain, warmth, swelling, redness, all that has a good, healthy purpose in acute settings. So the role of inflammation is kind of interesting. If you think of inflammation as a scorched earth approach, your body is essentially burning the area to protect you, and it's summoning your immune system to attack any invading pathogens. Symptoms of inflammation are redness, which is a visual alert that something is wrong, swelling, a cushioning to kind of protect the area from further damage, heat, which is a fire to burn the problem, and pain, right? A signal to take it easy. You even experience loss of function inevitably as well, but this is kind of a rarer effect of inflammation and usually when it's been going on for a long time. This is not as common, but it's really a way for your body to shut down use to preserve the area. It wants you to stop using it, right? Now, all of these signs have been known since even before the ancient Greeks coined the terms and named it inflammation. So they've existed time immemorial, really. The birth of chronic pain. So chronic pain is kind of then born out of a strange and misunderstood process in which your body kind of stops this natural healing process from ending. It's sort of like your brain forgot to flip the switch. Now, sometimes I think this comes down to pain medications. We kind of turn the warning signals off as we mask the pain, and the brain thinks it's already shut down, but that inflammatory program is continuing to run in the background. So it's like a dysfunction of the nervous system as it's become used to something. Inflammation then continues, pain flares up, swelling gets worse, and loss of function starts to set in. And in cases of autoimmune disease here, the body sees this inflammation as a threat, and it sends your immune system to an area with nothing to attack but you, right? So then you become the target of this chronic pain. So the root cause here. Now, this is actually evident. You'll find evidence for this with the National Institutes of Health, that over 80% of all chronic disease, illness, and pain is the result of inflammation. It's actually more likely to be 100% in my experience, but the above there is the official statistics, again, from the National Institutes of Health. This means that out of the 1.5 billion people around the world suffering from pain, at least 1.2 billion of them are suffering still because of an inflammatory response. Now, again, inflammation is a natural part of the healing process during these acute stages. But when we look to this inflammation as that body wrecking event that sticks around, blocks electrical communication, causes pain and discomfort, then we start to see the answer to that original question, because we now know why we are not healing. So inflammation and pain are intricately connected here. You can't really have pain without inflammation unless the area is sort of so ravaged by the inflammatory response that the pain you now experience is degenerative nerve pain. without any signs of inflammation at all. So there's no swelling, there's no redness, there's no pain. These things as well can be one or another. You don't have to get all symptoms of inflammation to have inflammation. You might experience swelling, you might experience pain, you might experience loss of function. These are symptoms of inflammation, but they're not kind of isolated necessarily and requiring all of them to be together. You can have kind of one and not the others, or you can have all of them or a couple of them. But still to this day, and we come against this all the time, certain governing bodies see a difference between pain and inflammation, as if you can have one without the other. So when we sit here and we can use our protocol to erase pain and stop it coming back, what you've actually done on a kind of cellular level is eliminate inflammation in its entirety. But you're not allowed to say that you can do that. All you can say is that you can manage pain, because there's no connection in their eyes between pain and inflammation, despite, of course, this going back hundreds, thousands of years, right? So it's very complex of a topic that really shouldn't be complex, and it shouldn't be an argument or a discussion even. It is just fact. So why aren't we healing? Well, we're hit with this inflammation, right? And it's impossible to regenerate in the presence of inflammation. It holds us in that space of protection while the body gets ready to heal. But it doesn't allow us to heal until the inflammation itself is turned down. Now, we don't know the inflammation is there when we cover it up, so we forget about it, right? And we trick our body into forgetting about it. All the while, it's causing more and more damage to the body. And this is what I kind of said, that this can end up in creation of something like degenerative nerve pain, as over time, it continues to spread and not go away. In an acute state, the inflammation shows up, the immune system walks over and fixes the problem as the inflammation abates. But if the inflammation stays strong and doesn't reduce, then we're kind of stuck, and we're going to get into that situation where we are not healing. It's part to do as well just with the survival instinct of the body. Inflammation creates pain, but it's kind of that protective stopgap so that we're not having to keep running away and not be able to essentially survive. It says, you can run, we will preserve this, and when you're done, you will heal. Now, if we're not able to rest and relax and get out of that state and get to the point where the inflammation turns off, the healing just doesn't occur because the body is constantly looking for that. When we talk a little bit more about that tomorrow, I believe, the fight or flight response. Ultimately, this is kind of the analogy I like to use for this. It's like walking into a room in your house and seeing the bed on fire and closing the door. Just because you close the door doesn't mean that the fire is gone, right? You don't have to look at it, but it is still there. It's still burning away. And it continues to burn and causes damage because it burns for so long. You wouldn't do this to your house, right? You wouldn't. You wouldn't just say, oh, my room's on fire. Well, I'm going to go watch TV. Unless I suppose you were committing arson or something. But you wouldn't do this. But we do this to our bodies all the time. We take a look, we see the fire is burning, we pop some Tylenol, and we go and we watch TV. And we expect that it's just going to resolve itself. But this fire keeps burning and it spreads. And this is where you get people, and this was reflected kind of in the homework, unfortunately, where people were saying, it started with one thing and it spiraled out of control into multiple things. Because as inflammation continues, it creates and develops these symptoms and problems, right, throughout it. So no one would do this, but we do it to our bodies all the time. Now, on the channelopathies, I talked about channelopathies yesterday, and these are a little bit complex. So let's start with this. Let's say that you don't need to understand channelopathies. You just need to know that they exist and that they could be a problem. Channelopathies are essentially diseases that develop because of defects in ion channels that are caused by genetic or acquired factors. While genetic mutation can lead to the development of channelopathies, inflammation can be a problem here as well. Cells rely on achieving what we call action potential if they're going to effectively replicate and function. This is part of the body electric. Inflammation will lower cell function and it will drop cellular voltage so that the cells cannot achieve action potential. Eventually, this will get them stuck. They will stop trying. In effect, this eventually leads to cell death and in turn to the creation of channelopathies. So, how's chronic disease born? Well, channelopathies relate more to disease than they do pain. So most people that are here, I know there were a bunch of people that are dealing with autoimmune disease. Some of them are unidentified autoimmune diseases. Many of them know that it's just inflammation everywhere. And channelopathies tend to cause more autoimmunes than they do just general pain. But most people, unfortunately, that start off with chronic pain, whether it's from an accident or any kind of just general discomfort, will develop one or more autoimmune diseases within about 5 years. So you're going to kind of have this problem spread. The average number of diagnosed conditions that I see in my patients is 3. And many people that put their information in the homework are pretty much identifying along those lines. But the root of all of these conditions is the same. It's the inflammatory response, the inflammation that's just not going away. So let's dive into action potential. And again, don't worry too much about understanding it beyond the fact that it exists. But for those of you who are really interested in it, let's kind of show it off here. So action potential is a 4-step process that allows your cells to replicate, function, and repair. Step 1. So your cells are resting at a certain voltage level. This is actually negative 70 millivolts. You can see this down here. This is the line. This is their resting state. At this point in time, they are not doing anything. They're just kind of hanging out. Now, in order to reach threshold where they initiate and create action potential, cells must increase their voltage, meaning they must get more electricity in order to do this. So cells must reach threshold by raising to negative 55. So they get this little short boost. Once they hit threshold, which you can see here, then the process can begin. If they don't, then they start to experience what we call failed initiations. So this is multiple attempts, kind of like trying to start a car and the engine won't turn over. Multiple attempts to do this, they keep failing, and so the cell then re-enters the resting state, okay? So it enters this, it fails a bunch, and it just keeps entering the resting state, and it thinks, I'll try again later. But that means that it didn't initiate action potential. So stimulation of these, again, attempts to raise the voltage and reach threshold. And once it does, once you get enough stimulus, it will climb up, depolarize, and then repolarize, drop below into hyperpolarization, and then re-enter resting state. But in that moment, it's functioned, it's communicated, and things are functioning normally. So if it's successful, the cell sends its signal, the body continues functioning. Failed initiations repeatedly, which is what happens in the presence of things like chronic inflammation, hydration, and so on, can prevent the signals from going through the body and block communication and allow the cellular function to fail and lead into what we call channelopathies. Issues such as chronic inflammation, lack of hydration, scar tissue, a lot of people identify that as a problem in their homework as well, presence of disease that damages cells and beyond. These are all things that will prevent the electrical system from functioning and reaching that required threshold to take on action potential and actually function normally. So take that for what you will, but the concept of action potential is very important to understanding why we develop certain diseases. Channelopathies are kind of numerous in their in what they actually are, and they include but are not limited to things like epilepsy, autoimmune disease, diabetes, heart defects, ataxia, blindness, deafness, peripheral pain syndromes, and more. Epilepsy is something that is an interesting one there because it kind of develops out of brain inflammation, and this shows that inflammation spreads quite rapidly. But one of the key ones to all of this, and the one that this is the reason I highlight channelopathies, is autoimmune disease. There are so many autoimmune diseases, right? And they're all just inflammation of something different, right? Hashimoto's is inflammation that's localized to the thyroid. Rheumatoid arthritis, inflammation in the joints. Crohn's disease, inflammation in the gut. You name it. There's all these different things. If someone asked, is Parkinson's a manifestation of channelopathies? And yes, I believe Parkinson's is a channelopathy as well. So it's kind of crazy that this is just a permanent like thing that we have to be concerned about because it doesn't kind of go away, right? It just sticks around and stays unless we can improve that electrical function. So how do we reduce the risk of channelopathies? Well, sort of in the same way that eliminating inflammation will stop pain, eliminating inflammation can also prevent the onset of channelopathies by ultimately improving cellular function. And additionally, restoring the body's electrical network will make sure that we minimize the chances of these conditions recurring or developing because how does that work? Well, we increase our cellular voltage and the body reaches action potential. It no longer fails to do that, and so cellular function continues as normal, and everything works hunky-dory the way it's supposed to. Now, we do revisit this topic in a few days' time as well, because we have to look at ways to reverse channelopathies. There's a lot of concern about that. You're in this place where you're consistently dealing with channelopathies, and how do you get out of that? How do you get out of that hole? So I will say, again, channelopathies is kind of a complex topic in a way, but not to worry too much about it as far as understanding the mechanism of it. That's not important. The important piece is to understand that when our cells do not function effectively, then they can fail to initiate, and in effect, they can then fail to function. And this is where we have to be strongly concerned about what they can actually do in those situations. So what about the aggravators? This is kind of what we're going to be working on over the next few days as well, because we understand the idea, right, of inflammation now. We know how it works, why it works, and what it's doing. And that in a way, it's trying to function, and help us out. And things like, physical ailments like broken arms, herniated discs, these are not necessarily channelopathies. These are more presence of inflammation. The inflammation itself, especially with like disc issues, has pushed the disc out of the spine. And when you relax that inflammation, the disc will actually slot back in. It doesn't want to be out there. It wants to be back where it belongs. But the inflammation is kind of like pressing on it and pushing it out, like a balloon swelling up, right? And it's kind of expanding that. So once you relax the inflammation and the swelling reduces, then the disc pops back into place. So it's a very interesting kind of concept that the inflammation, which is in part mechanism that's trying to help us, is working against us. And this is where we have to look to what is creating and feeding the inflammation. Now, in my past life, I like to say I did a lot of different degrees before I settled on what I was going to do. And one of them was a bachelor's in English Lit. I originally wanted to be an English teacher. So stories often play into my life a lot. And there's a quote by Patrick Ness, which is one of the favorite things that I have to kind of throw at my son. And as he's gotten older, it's become more and more important, is that we are the choices we make and have to make. We aren't anything else. Okay. So when I tell him this, I'm trying to kind of emphasize that the choices he makes in life and the decisions he takes will define him as a person. But the same thing kind of applies to our health as well, doesn't it? Because as individuals, we often know what our aggravators are. We know that when we do something we shouldn't, it kind of makes us feel worse. And that is what sets us off. But we have to remember that 9 times out of 10 in these situations, we have a choice that we can make to reduce or eliminate the issue and then inevitably alter who we are as a human being. And again, we're going to talk about this altering who we are, tomorrow a bit more. But what you have to understand is that we are not rootedly defined as what we may feel like we are. And that may sound confusing, but you are not your disease, right? You are a person. And people can actually alter their DNA through the things they do, the things they consume, and in effect make themselves less susceptible to these things as well. Okay. So common aggravators that are some of the most concerning things here, medications. So these often help us in one way with a cost in another. We talked about this yesterday. We reduce the pain, and even insofar as NSAIDs, that's a great example there. Ibuprofen, it will actually reduce inflammation. That is what it does, which may seem like a good thing. If the root cause of all of your problems is inflammation, then let's get rid of the inflammation and we're good. But even short-term use of NSAIDs can actually cause failure of organs. And so they don't recommend you take them for more than a week, two maximum. And taking them every day is even kind of a sketchy concept because of what they can do. So we have to be very careful of the things that we consume in that way. And medications can be a big part of that process. I saw a lot of people talk about that in their homework, actually. They were essentially saying that, they got to be really careful with the medications they take and that they've tried to take. I accidentally clicked off my video there, sorry. So over exercising, it's easy to get carried away into thinking that we need to exercise like crazy in order to get better. Overdoing it, though, is just as bad. And this is a big problem, too, because we get to this point where exercise feels good, so we push it too far. And we see this with patients all the time. As you start to reduce your pain, you think, oh, now I want to go back to walking my dog or running or doing the weights and things like that that I used to do. But pushing it too far makes the problem worse because it can send you back into a pain crisis that compounds itself as a problem. Toxic relationships. This is a really, really hard one to deal with, whether it's family, friends, coworkers, whatever it may be. When we foster toxic relationships, we'll be fostering toxicity in the body. It's just how it is. It's part of the poison that we put upon ourselves is the attitudes and the dysfunction of others. And there's some people that we literally can't cut out, and there are others that we can choose to limit our relationship with. That one is one of the hardest ones to deal with. And I've personally had to go through that recently with a family member. But when I realized it just wasn't doing me any good to be in that kind of relationship. And I had to kind of push that away to get to the point where I was able to get better. And wow, is it a huge difference when you do? And I've heard the same from other people as well. When they've pushed back the toxicity in their life, they've removed the toxicity in their bodies. Poor nutrition. This is a really big one, and for most people, this is kind of the killer one here, and we'll go over this tomorrow, but we do know what's good for us, right? We know that we probably shouldn't eat the pizza. Maybe we shouldn't have that burger that we want, but people tend to do it anyway. So the question is, are we actually aggravating ourselves in this way? And it's not the issue for everyone. Some people don't have those issues at all. And then the nutrition part is not the problem. But it is kind of predominantly when we do this, the one people focus the most on, because it is the one that can have one of the biggest impacts as well. Exposure to wireless technology is a common aggravator too. Remember that our body is electric. Hitting it with signals from all of this technology can send us into an aggressive fight or flight mode. And this is a problem. We'll talk about this tomorrow too. But when you get into this fight or flight mode, you're not able to heal. You're creating inflammation. You're in a pro-inflammatory state. Supplements as well. These are often touted as good options for everyone, but it's entirely possible to take too many supplements or the wrong ones. But the question is, which ones are wrong? Which ones are wrong for you? Do you have a problem with that supplement that everyone else says is amazing? It's very possible. And when we take these supplements, we can get ourselves into these traps. You'll notice we don't promote very many supplements at all. There are some good ones that are useful for you, and we'll talk about this again in the coming days. But the major things here are to get the only essential things that you are missing from your body from something like a supplement. And then poor sleep. This is a huge one too. And again, people identified this in their homework as one of their major issues. Lack of sleep can lead to increased stress on the body. And in turn, this creates more inflammation. So we're getting stuck in this loop and we can't escape it. It's absolutely crazy. So that's the end of today's lesson. And it's important to kind of do this piece of the homework because then tomorrow we're going to work on the solutions to the aggravators. So what I want you to do is I want you to reflect a little bit about what we've talked about today and what your healing journey has been so far. In your workbook on page 11, and I've got my workbook right here, you'll notice there's page 11 and page 12 are both day 2 homework. You can answer the following questions. The spaces for these here. And pay attention here just for a moment. So what are your chronic symptoms you consistently experience and when did they begin? And remember, I define chronic as more than like 3-4 weeks, okay? If they're still with you then, you're probably looking at something that in my experience is on the verge of turning chronic or already turned chronic. So what are your chronic symptoms you consistently experience? When did they begin? What is the impact on your life? Okay. What have you lost from this? Because this is very important to being able to visualize what we're going to get back when we get out of here. So I've had people before that have said, you know, my chronic hip pain has caused me to not be able to play with my grandkids or to not be able to go on family trips or, you know, Crohn's disease. That was one last year. Crohn's disease that has stopped a person being able to go out with their friends because they just are worried about when they're going to need to go to the bathroom. So think about the chronic symptoms and categorize them down as symptoms. Don't just say, you know, my Crohn's disease. Think like, you know, this part of Crohn's disease has caused me to lose this, that, because we need to kind of look at those pieces and what's the impact on your life. And bonus homework here, this is really helpful for me to see when I'm going through your homework. Can you identify any of your specific aggravators? If we go back here and we look at what I talked about here, medications, over-exercising, toxic relationships, poor nutrition, wireless tech, supplements, poor sleep, anything there that you think triggers you or anything that you've thought of outside of my examples there, because those are just some common ones there. So you get a little bit of a bonus credit with me if you can identify any of those aggravators as well. Now, tomorrow, I'm really hoping you'll join me for day 3 because we're going to be talking about the Hache protocol and the first 4 elements anyway. This is about the lifestyle of pain-free living, and we're going to outline the elements that we need to incorporate to build that healing foundation. So we're going to be able to actually establish a lot of this stuff through the homework. So remember, if you have any questions, to reach out to your concierge. So thank you everyone for joining me, and I hope to see you tomorrow, as many of you as possible. Remember, if you need help, to text Leo at 415-688-2045. I look forward to seeing your homework, those of you in the Facebook group posting. I'm really excited to start responding to those homework questions tomorrow. And if you haven't done day 1 yet, remember, it's not too late to catch up. You can watch everything again at pffljumpstartreplays.com. Thank you, everyone. This was awesome. And I look forward to seeing you then, okay? Take care.